All right, and we are on our final section, starting with chapter 12. I suppose I could go into a bunch of detail about what we talked about, but I'm going to be writing it up in my essay anyway. Anybody who wants to can see it there. I learned a few things about my parents, and we got into some of the things that were bothering me. When I told Mom I was mad at her the other night, she said, "Why didn't you say anything?" "'Cause I was mad," I said. "Well, we're going to have to do something about that," she said. When we started packing up for bed, Dad said, "So, how does it feel to be nice for a night?" And I said, in my best fatherly voice, "Dad, it's something you'll have to find out for yourself." He thought that was pretty funny. Mom gave me a hug before I went upstairs. It wasn't one of those nothing hugs you get sometimes from people. My brother's wife, for example, always looks like she wants to run her shirt down to the cleaners after she hugs me. And at Christmas, when everyone really gets lovable and starts kissing each other, she always gives me one of those dry little pecks on the cheek. Sometimes she doesn't even touch my cheek. She just leans forward and kisses the air in front of it. It's not that I'm a dirty person or anything. In our house, cleanliness has pulled even with godliness in terms of importance. She just doesn't like me, for some reason. Anyway, Mom gave me a real hug before I went to bed. She wrapped her arms around me so tightly that it felt like I was in the grip of an octopus. My face went flat up against her chest. I was stuck there, and I couldn't move, but I didn't really mind it. While she was holding me, she said, "You know, Harper, we've had some good times over the years." And I started thinking about some of the things I wrote about in class, and I said, "I know, Mom, I want them to come back." After about a minute, she let me go, and we looked at each other and sort of smiled. I could tell she was going to start crying again pretty soon, so I said goodnight and ran up to my room. When I got there, I thought about all the things we had talked about, and I realized for the first time in a long time, I actually felt that I belonged in my own home. It was pretty weird. I almost started crying again myself. 13. Miss Davis was away on Monday, so I didn't get a chance to tell anyone about how things were going with my parents until class Tuesday night. I walked in and Patty was there at her desk by the door, plugging in her Sony Walkman. I asked her what tape she was listening to. I already knew the answer, but I just felt like talking. "Anne Murray," she said. "Isn't she kind of old?" I said. "My parents listen to Anne Murray." "She drinks 8 cups of water a day to stay healthy," said Patty. "Wow, I bet she goes to the bathroom more times than that." "Quiet, my tape's on." Dell was at her table at the front of the class. I walked up behind her and told her to cover her eyes. "If this is a stick-up, I should warn you, my husband is 6'5" and weighs 285 pounds, she said. I put a 2-liter bottle of Coke in front of her and said, "Don't move, or I'll belch." She opened her eyes and said, "I can't drink that. I'm on a new diet. I bet my son $10 I can lose 10 pounds by Christmas." "So start tomorrow," I said. "Well, okay, but give me a little glass." "You'll never guess what's gone on in my house since I was here last week," I said, handing her the same coffee cup she used since the class started. "Let me see. You painted the ceilings and the walls. You've wallpapered the windows. Your mother has made everyone matching pantsuits to wear to church. Your father has given up politics and has become a Boy Scout leader. Your sister-in-law lost her job and came begging to you to help her find a new one. Am I getting close?" "We've been nice to each other for almost a week." Dell stopped moving with her coffee cup in midair and looked at me to see if I was joking. When she saw the smile on my face, she said, "I'm impressed." "So am I said. "You should see it. It's pretty neat." "So you're all running around and holding hands or what?" "No, nothing like that. But it's different." When Josh came in, he asked me how things were going and I told him. "Good for you," he said. "That was pretty brave thing you did, showing them that letter." "I was scared. When I passed it to Mom, I didn't know if she was going to come at me with a knife or hug me to death." "Well, you're still here," said Dell. "Where'd she stab you?" "I've started doing it at school too," I said. "I saw my gym teacher the other day getting out of his car, and I walked by him and said, 'Hey, Mr. Jorgensen, nice car.' And he looked at me like I'd just swiped his hubcaps." "Had you?" said Dell. "No, but when I walked by him, I said, 'Just giving you a compliment. They don't come by every day, you know.' I'm sure he thought I was nuts." "How's the essay coming?" said Josh. He had to burst my bubble. "I haven't started it yet," I said. It's due at the end of this week. You want a hand? Sure, I said. I thought he was going to sit down and help me write it, but instead he went to where he always stands when he's talking about the class and said, "Okay, tonight what I want you to do is, I want you to think of a time in your life when you were sad or lonely or angry at someone, or how you turned yourself around. What did you do? Did you talk to someone? Did you go to church? Did you change anything about your own behavior? Did you take action? Tell me what you did." That sent everyone off to work, and I sat there and thought about what else I could write about aside from being nice, since, in reality, not even that was going to get me very far. I mean, Mom and Dad think it's all right. My brother thinks I'm trying to hide something, and my sister thinks I just want to get out of writing the essay. In other words, being nice to them hasn't changed a thing. And at school, it's impossible to be nice to everybody. Darren Talbot pushed me out of the line at the cafeteria again. I was right there ready to get some soup, and he came in and told me the fire chief wanted to see me in the principal's office. All his goony friends laughed, and they butted in and told me to get to the end of the line, so I decided to go to my locker instead and eat by myself. Miss Davis can say what she wants, but sometimes being distant is the only way to survive in that high school. When our writing time was up, everybody read their stories out loud. I started writing down some of the things they were saying, because I figured that's what Josh wanted me to do. But then I started to get a feel for what was going on. All their stories were different. Lou wrote about why he burned the schoolhouse down. He said that when he was in grade 4, his teacher used to start every day by asking a student to pull a letter out of this giant box she had at the front of the class. Then she would ask the student to tell everyone what the letter was, and then say 2 words that began with it. She called Lou one day, and he went and did what he was told. Except Lou didn't know anything about the alphabet, and he had no idea if he was holding a B or an L or what. And she got very upset with him and called him ignorant, which he didn't understand, and told me he was just like his father. The thing was, Lou didn't even know who his father was, and didn't know a thing about him. But when the teacher said that, he got a picture in his head of a man standing at the front of the classroom with a bunch of kids laughing at him because he didn't know the alphabet. It wasn't too long after that all the kids had to go to the church for school because the schoolhouse was no longer available. Deborah told us about riding the bus with a bunch of school kids who kept calling her names all the time. She said one of them used to make her cry every day until a friend of her mother's, who happens to be a policeman, gave her a tube of pepper spray to scare them off with. "Be careful if you ever use it," he said. "This stuff can really sting." So the very next day, she got on the bus, and the kid who always made her cry tried to pull her book bag off her shoulder, which was something he did almost all the time. But Deborah was holding onto the strap of her bag very tightly, so when he yanked it, he pulled her right onto the floor of the bus. Now, usually when he did this, she would start to cry, and the bus driver would pull over and warn everybody. But this time, she reached into her book bag, pulled out the pepper spray, and let the guy have it right between the eyes. "He never rode the bus again," said Deborah, "and the next time I saw him, he crossed the street and ran home." Billy told us about the time he went to a drama club to learn more about acting, and they made him pretend he was a tree all night. This was the story I liked the best. "They thought I was joking," he said. "Why did they think you were joking?" asked Deborah. "I told them I wanted to be a Klingon on Star Trek, and they didn't believe me." Anyway, because he refused to leave, they told him to stand in the corner all night with his arms over his head. According to Billy, his arms got so tired, somebody had to chop him down. And when he showed up the next class, they told him to do the same thing. When he showed up at the next class, they asked him what he was doing, so he told them again that he wanted to be an actor, and they told him that he was becoming a bit of a nuisance and suggested he find somewhere else to hang out. So Billy went home and wrote a letter to this person. He had written several letters in the past years, and this person, who had told Billy to enroll in acting class if he was ever serious about becoming an actor, wrote back to Billy and said, "If they don't take you into their acting class, I will personally come down and find out what the problem is." So Billy took the letter with him to the next acting class and showed the instructor, and the instructor laughed and threw it in the garbage. So then Billy wrote another letter to this person, who happened to be William Shatner of Star Trek, except Billy kept on calling him Captain Kirk, even in his letters, and told him everything that had happened, and gave him the name and address of the acting class, and a list of the buses that went through that part of the city, in case the captain ran into difficulty getting there, and he waited very eagerly for the reply. But he never got one. He waited a few weeks, because it usually takes at least a month to get a letter back, but nothing came in the mail. He left his answering machine on whenever he went outside, but he never received a call. Then one day, about 6 months later, Billy was walking in front of the theater where the acting class was held, and he walked straight into the head instructor, who grabbed Billy by the shoulders and gave him a great big hug and led him into his office. On his wall in a frame was a letter that said, "If you are absolutely 100% sure this young man cannot become an actor, then you better think again. Sincerely, William Shatner." I guess the instructor had done everything he could to get a hold of Billy, but because Billy had never left his name, telephone number, or address, the guy couldn't really do too much. But from that day on, Billy has been going to the acting classes. Dell wrote about a parenting group she joined when she had her first baby, and how out of place everyone made her feel because she was an unwed teenage mother. So she took home all these books on parenting from the local library, and when her daughter was asleep, she read them. And after about 2 months, the only person who could answer Dell's question was the group's instructor. And after about 6 months, Dell was running a little group of her own. By the time her daughter turned 2, Dell was putting on a series of workshops on single parenting and hosting a support group for pregnant teenagers. I didn't read mine, because I didn't write anything, but Mom was a few minutes late picking me up, so I had a chance to write a few things down. Before I left, Josh said that he would be in on Friday, and if I wanted him to take a look at my essay. I didn't know for sure if I wanted him to or not, but I said okay anyway. I asked if he had any tips for me. "Just write what you feel," he said. "Leave yourself some time to read it over when you're done, and think about what you're going to say. But when you start writing, don't worry about format or anything like that. Just go with it. That's when you do best." He told me a few other things. Then I said goodbye and went downstairs. I felt like I was going to war or something. Everybody was wishing me luck and giving me advice. Billy asked if I needed to borrow his pencil sharpener. Deborah asked if I'd be coming back after my essay was finished. I said probably. She said, "Good. I like it when you're here." It's nice hearing things like that sometimes. Chapter 14. I went and saw Miss Davis the next morning and showed her my notes and told her I was going to say in my essay. It's not like I had everything mapped out or anything like that, but some things were starting to come clear to me. I still wanted her to see what I had, though. They weren't that clear. She made some suggestions and helped me with a few of my ideas. I think we both understand each other a bit better now. I know I understand her better. Before I left, I asked if she thought I was on the right track. "Oh, I think so," she said. "I think you've done some real thinking about this. I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see the essay." She meant it, too. That was one of the things about Miss Davis. She meant everything she said. Not everybody in my life is like that. "I'm excited to see it, too," I said. "So, when do you think you're going to write it?" "Tonight. Then I can read it tomorrow night and give it to him on Friday." She looked at me and smiled again, and for a minute or so, I got the feeling she was going to say something big and profound like, "You've come a long way, Harper," or something like that. But instead she just said, "Good luck with it," and left it at that. "Thanks," I said, and left her office. I wish someone had wished me all this luck before I got into this mess. I wouldn't even be here. Chapter 15. I stayed up all night and finished the thing at 5:30 this morning. Mom told me to stay in bed and enjoy the day, which sounded just fine to me. "You can read it, but promise you won't laugh. And if you have any suggestions, save them. You might need them for your own someday. Here it is. How I Plan to Turn My Life Around by Harper Winslow. Your Honor, I am not the greatest essay writer in the world, so please bear with me. The other thing is, I'm pretty nervous, so if you see a word that doesn't look right somewhere, it's probably because I hit the wrong key by accident. I'm normally a pretty good speller. Anyway, here it is. I hope you like it. I put a lot of thought into it, like you said I should. I don't know how a person could write an essay like this without putting a lot of thought into it. My counselor at school, her name is Miss Davis, said I should go with my own words instead of her fancy phrases. But just so you know that I know them, here are a few of the things she said I could do that would help me turn my life around. The first is to communicate more effectively with my parents and other important people in my life, like teachers. I have tried this with my mom and dad, and it's worked pretty well so far. We had a long talk about 2 weeks ago. I showed them this letter I had written about how lonely I was feeling. That got them going. They told me all about what it was like when I was born. Mom said she was really busy with her store, and Dad was starting his own medical clinic. My brother and sister went into their teens and doing crazy stuff like staying out after their curfew and refusing to make their beds. Not exactly the stuff you turn into a movie, but Mom and Dad said it was very stressful. When Mom found out she was pregnant, well, you could just imagine. None of this meant much to me. Maybe it should have, but it didn't. So I said to them, I thought we were talking about me tonight." Well, Mom got a bit steamed over that comment, but because we were being nice to each other, she never said anything. She just smiled and said, "Okay, honey, let's talk about you." So we talked about me for the rest of the time. Dad didn't even yawn once. He even said at one point, "You're a bright kid, you know that?" I said, "Thanks, Dad, you're pretty bright yourself." He doesn't mind when I get like that with him, at least not when he's in a good mood. He said he misses it, actually. Mom said that's because Dad was the smart aleck of his family, so that's where I got it from. We talked about a lot of things that night. I told him I hate the way they're always getting tutors for me without asking what the problem is. Mom said, "How can we ask you anything when you're always up in your room?" So I said, "Well, you're never home, so what am I supposed to do?" You can see what kind of things we have to work out, but Miss Davis said that now the issues are out in the open, they'll be easier to deal with. She also asked me what my goals are. She asked me this the meeting after I told her about this dog that I've always wanted, but I've never been allowed to have because I wasn't responsible enough. I got pretty upset the day I told her about it, so the next time I went to see her, she asked me to think about what I would have to do to get my own dog. Then she brought up this idea of goal setting. She said we could start with a basic one, like getting to school on time, and work our way up from there. It took me a few weeks to warm to the idea, but now I have a little list of a few things I want to do. Getting a dog is one of them. I'll have to talk to Mom and Dad about what I have to do to get one. I'm sure they're going to make me do the dishes and shovel the sidewalk and do better at school, but I would really like a dog. We also talked about setting aside one day of every month to be a family day, although I don't know if that's possible or not. Dad said he is so busy these days, he has to check his daytimers to find out when he can come home. So we may have to settle for a family hour or something. For starters, anyway. At school, I'm going to sign up for the newspaper. I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and I've discovered that I really enjoy it. I mean, I used to write all the time, but I never showed anyone. But since I joined this writing class, I've discovered that I'm actually pretty good at it. At least, that's what my instructor says. And Miss Davis has been encouraging me since I first saw her to get more involved at school. Those are two main things that I talked about with her, communication and goal setting. Everything else that I learned about turning my life around came from the writing class Mom put me in. It's called the Tuesday Cafe. The people in it are not at all what you would expect. They sure weren't what I was expecting. They're all learning how to read and write. Some of them are mentally handicapped. I know what you think I'm going to say is, now I know how thankful I should be because these people are handicapped and I'm not. And some of them have been disadvantaged right from the start while I haven't been. So maybe I should stop complaining and get on with my life. Well, that's true to a point. But Miss Davis said that the frustration I felt the day I started the fire was real. And the loneliness I feel is real. And that to tell myself to stop crying and be happy would be, in her words, negating my inner pain. I think I know what she means by that. Anyway, at one of my meetings with her, she asked me to think about why I have such a hard time getting along with other people, and no problem at all getting along with people in my writing class. I didn't know how to answer at first, but at the last class I went to, my friend Dell basically gave it to me. I've been worrying about this essay and exactly what I was going to say in it, and she just said, "Just show him who you are. That will be good enough. He'll like that." Then I realized it was the first class I have ever been to where I didn't try to separate myself from everyone else. I usually sit in the back of the room at school. I don't talk to anyone. When we have to do something in pairs, I'll just sit and wait for everyone else to get their partner, and then I'll go with the odd man out. That's just the way it's always been for me at school. I've never really seemed to click with anyone. But at this place, I sat right in the front of the class because Dell was serving me Coca-Cola for the whole 2 hours, and no one ever asked me who I was or where I lived or what my parents did. They didn't judge me or anything like that, and I guess I didn't judge them. They just started talking to me like I was a human being, and I just talked back to them as if they were too. It's kind of funny, actually, but it was the last place I thought of looking for a friend, and the only place I've ever found one. Anyway, at the last class, the instructor, his name is Josh, asked everyone to write a story about a time when they were unhappy or lonely in their lives and how they got to be happy again. They all had lots of stories to tell, and as I listened to them, I began to see something. I told Miss Davis and she helped me figure out what it is. This is what we came up with. I used to think that I would never get along with my parents and that I would never have any friends. I used to see Mom and Dad getting all dressed up to go out to dinner or a party, and they still sit around the table after supper some nights and go over the various invitations they've received and decide which ones they can accept and which ones they'd rather not go to or couldn't go to. And I could never, in a million years, picture myself doing the same thing, because I've never had an invitation to a party, much less two on the same night. I remember sometimes lying in bed, listening to my brother and sister laugh it up with Mom and Dad, and I can see with my own eyes how excited Mom gets whenever my brother brings his family around, or my sister brings hers around. And I would try to see Mom get excited over me coming home, but I never really could. I think this is why I got so frustrated. Then I listened to all those stories by the people in my class, and I started to realize that life changes for people, and I can control how it will change for me. I mean, this one woman, Susan, she's really, really skinny. And one day I asked her why she doesn't eat more, and she told me this story about when she was 11, her mom died. So she was moved into a boarding house, and the woman who ran the place hated to cook, and was a lousy cook, but she always made Susan eat everything she made, even if it was completely burned or totally raw in the middle, and Susan used to get sick every night, and now she hated food. Anyway, Susan told us a story about when she was 9 years old. She used to ride her bike around this little park at the end of her street, and how this group of kids used to tease her because she still had training wheels on her bicycle. She used to cry all the time, but her mom still made her go outside because the fresh air and exercise would be good for her. The way it used to go was these kids would be sitting in front of one of the shelters in the park smoking cigarettes, and when they heard Susan come around, they would run outside, over this little hill and down to the bike path. They could hear Susan coming because she had one of those little clickers on the spikes of her bike that would let people on the path know she was behind them. She liked the clicker on the spikes more than a bell because she had to take one of her hands off the handlebars to ring the bell, and she didn't like doing that. So at the start of one of her rides one day, she decided to take the clicker off. She said she didn't know where the idea came from, but she did it. And she rode all around the park without making any noise, and the kids never came out of the shelter. In fact, they never bothered her again. Now she has 2 friends she goes bike riding with, and whenever she sees kids with a clicker on the spikes of their bike, she makes a point of saying hi to them so they won't feel bad. So my point is, I can do things to deal with my unhappiness just like she did with hers. I mean, I know some things are going to happen whether I want them to or not, and as Miss Davis said, some people are just plain mean no matter what you say to them. But they will not be in my life forever, and my life will go on, and I have a say in where it's going. I mean, I know I don't have a clicker I can take off my bike, but for the first time in my life, I smiled at this girl I know, Martha Fishburne, and she smiled back at me. And I was nice to my parents for one whole night, and we've been pretty nice to each other ever since. Although sometimes it's a good thing that they're not around very much. I hope all of this makes sense. Anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say. I think I'm at about 2,000 words, but I'm not completely sure. Like I said, this might not be the greatest essay in the world, but I hope it's all right. The other thing that Miss Davis said to me was that if I really want to turn things around, I'll stay out of your courtroom, and I think she might have something there. Chapter 16. I took the essay in to Josh, and he read it over and told me not to change anything. He said he thought it was fine just the way it is. He had to hurry to get to the I had to hurry to get to the courthouse on time, but I wanted to ask him something first. I wanted to know if the message I got about having control over my life was one he wanted me to get. And he said, "You never know what you'll learn when you leave your ears open." I want to remember that. I told him I would be returning on Tuesday for another class. He said he was looking forward to seeing me again, and congratulated me on a job well done. My parents said they thought my essay was terrific. Terrific. Lately, I've been getting the feeling that my life has been turning for me ever since I stepped out of that courtroom. I just didn't know it until now. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Anyway, I have to run. Today I found out what kind of community service work I have to do. What a thrill that's going to be. And we did it. Made it all the way to the end. Proud of you.